Okay, so
He died being our king of North Preston. The whole community is not good.
this is
I feel
absolutely
for
an
parents and
awful
I feel for the
tragedy, and
to see that this was something that actually happened.
what else is there to say?
Tragic as it was brazen.
Except that
On a busy street during rush hour. Kane was in a vehicle with a
you don't want to
26-year-old man who
politicize
was
things,
also shot
obviously,
from another
but
vehicle, but is now recovering.
what do you want to bet
Police are
that
calling this a
he was shot
homicide
with a
and
gun that
looking
was
for
smuggled in
suspects.
from the United States? What actually, really, what do you want to bet? So, are you politicizing it, or are you saying, like, look, if you could if you could find some way to crack down more on that sort of shit, then you could prevent this sort of episode from happening in the future, right? Right. That's not really why I wanted to do this. I wanted to do this for because I found something spectacularly funny.
They're going to keep shooting until somebody innocent gets hit, and now it happened. And it's so sad that it had to be Marmar.
His cousin says Marmar Kane's Christmas gifts were already under the tree.
And I'm just feeling sorry for them Christmas morning to know that that one section is probably going to be left there. It's going to be hard for her to remove that.
Police are promising to get more information to the public.
But of course, what CBC is doing this to get viewers.
During what is supposed to be a joyous time of year.
Yeah, right.
Paul Murphy, CBC News, Halifax.
Asshole.
An update on our story last in the Winter Olympics. It's now official. The league will not send players to Beijing.
Okay, so the story here is that the NBA players, after having been double vaccinated, there's a good chance that they would have had natural immunity before they were vaccinated. It's a good chance they've had COVID. The vaccine doesn't seem to slow the spread at all. Anyway, so they've been double vaccinated. We've got really fantastic therapeutics. We've got tests. So if there's any test came forward that they had COVID, they could find it immediately and start using treatments. And they're actually, like, fucking hockey players are afraid of COVID. Oh. Wow. And the NBA is afraid of COVID. Okay, what is COVID? COVID is a good excuse to avoid the Winter Olympics. I'll give them that. But, wow. The world has lost its fucking mind.
My opinion, a smart decision. I mean, I don't know who would really want to go under those circumstances.
In a statement, the NHL said, given the profound disruption caused by COVID-related events, Olympic participation is no longer feasible, with more than 15% of players sidelined.
So Canadian hockey players won't go and fight for a chance to win the Olympics.
COVID cases among the Toronto Raptors have forced a postponement of tonight's
So I don't
Olympics.
blame
The Chicago
basketball
Bulls,
players so
after
much.
Toronto couldn't field enough players. At least 8 Raptors are now in the NBA's health and safety protocols. This is the third time.
But it's a little difficult to understand, actually, because
in the U.S., Joe Biden is declaring
Joe
victory.
Biden. So in the United States, at least, the basketball players are notorious for sucking up to the Chinese Communist Party. Oh, so why aren't they doing it here? Maybe are Canadian players as notorious for sucking up to the Chinese Communist Party as American basketball players? That's a question. That's an interesting question. Okay, so now you're going to hear them talk about Joe Biden's fantastic solutions to the supply chain issues in the United States.
Over the pandemic-fueled supply chain problems.
Rah, Biden.
Shoppers, just in time for Christmas. But what does it mean for those waiting for goods on this side of the border? Here's Katie Nicholson.
From the West Coast to the East, global supply chain issues prompted by the pandemic choked ports with container ships.
Okay, here's the next.
We're still catching up as a nation.
Oh no,
to what
there's a white
happened
guy.
A year and a half ago when Asia shut down.
Holy Christ.
The pain is real for retailers, auto dealers, struggling to get new cars
The pain
on
is
the road.
real for
Furniture
retailers.
vendors with half-empty warehouses. Even liquor stores having a hard time keeping their shelves.
Even liquor stores are having, oh, good God almighty. What a tragedy. Hey, why didn't we decide to put a tax on luxury alcohol over the pandemic? If you put a tax on luxury, high-priced alcohol, that might have actually put a dent in alcohol consumption. And you could have used the money for something useful. Now, you wouldn't think of it. The great thing about the COVID restrictions is that they made no demand on our right to pollute our brains with noxious substances, and zero impact whatsoever. Alcoholism, opiate overdoses, all that went up through the roof.
Stocked. There's a shortage in glass. There's a shortage in cork. There's a shortage in all the materials necessary for bottling.
You gotta love that guy.
But the supply
Okay,
chain
so here we
is
go.
catching up, says the U.S. president.
Right now, the number of containers moving through our ports is higher than ever.
After new investments in ports and rails and slash.
Okay. That's a good news story, I guess. But it's not exactly a good news story for people that want to combat climate change, is it? Right? Like, do they have any insight whatsoever? I don't think so. Okay, so I started this because they said something that was so funny. What they said was, I'm reading this aloud, and so you can just tell me if I got it essentially correct or not. Okay, so COVID is not the only thing causing supply issues as of late. And this was laugh out loud funny to me at the time. The BC floods, which clogged the port of Vancouver, now being blamed for a French fry shortage in Japan. Like, anyone in Canada is supposed to care about a French fry shortage in Japan. Like, aren't we a little concerned about high cholesterol and heart disease and obesity and all that shit? Wouldn't a French fry shortage in Japan actually be a good thing? And that's not the end of it. So, the BC floods, which clogged the port of Vancouver, are now being blamed for a French fry shortage in Japan. Evidence that both Canada and the U.S. don't just need to pandemic-proof the supply chain, they need to climate change-proof the supply chain. If you need more proof that Canada needs and the United States need to climate-proof the supply chain, look no further than a French fry shortage in Japan. I swear to God. Are these writers being chosen for their intellect or for something else? I mean, good Christ almighty. Honest to God, I mean, it's so common and so ridiculous and so whatever and regular and all that. I don't know. Is it even funny anymore? I think this is funny. If you want proof that Canada needs to climate-proof its supply chain, look no further than a French fry shortage in Japan. That's not exactly how she said it, but that's what it meant.
After new investments in ports and rails and slashing red tape to get more truckers on the road, Joe Biden is confident the U.S. supply chain will soon be running at pre-pandemic capacity.
Rah,
So what does that
Biden.
mean for Canada?
After 3 months, and
Okay, here's the other,
our store has finally arrived.
Ali Ukur doesn't just study the supply chain, he's been affected by it too, waiting for months. For
Okay,
this
so I
storm
guess,
to arrive.
like if you're to go back and count, I think that maybe counting the journalists and the commentators and all that, I think you've had like
But there's a caveat.
10%
Canadian logistics companies
white guy.
have to be ready for
That's
the
not bad,
increased
I
flow
guess.
of goods.
It will not mean much if the goods that are destined to come to Canada
are sitting at the borders.
But they would only go to a white guy in, if they couldn't find anybody else.
Now being blamed for a French fry shortage
Okay, there it
in
was.
Japan. Evidence that both Canada and the supply chain is catching up, says the U.S. president.
Right now, the number of containers moving through our ports is higher than ever.
After new investments in ports and rails and slashing red tape to get more truckers on the road, Joe Biden is confident the U.S. supply chain will soon be running at pre-pandemic capacity. So what does that mean for Canada?
After 3 months and countless phone calls, our store has finally arrived.
Ali Ukur doesn't just study the supply chain, he's been affected by it too, waiting for months for this stove
Sorry
to
about this.
arrive from New Jersey.
Any improvement in supply chains in the United States will definitely impact our supply chains in Canada.
Cool photos, eh? Sometimes they have pretty neat.
Canadian logistics companies have to be ready for the increased
They got some
flow of
good
goods.
camera people.
It will not mean much if the goods that are destined to come to Canada are sitting at the borders.
Nice enough
That
guy.
isn't the only thing causing
Okay, here you
supply
go.
chain issues of late. The BC floods, which clogged the port of Vancouver, now being blamed for a French fry shortage in Japan. Evidence that both Canada and the U.S. don't need to just pandemic-proof the supply chain. They need to climate change-proof it as well. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Washington.
Wow.